Hey guys, this is DCHL Devin here, and welcome to another How to Play video. And in this video, we're going to go ahead and talk about the Fiefdoms. Now, who are the Fiefdoms? They're pretty much a bunch of city-states south of Gondor that govern themselves. Now, during times of war, they actually help out Gondor, and they actually are known to pretty much take orders only in times of war from Prince Imrahil himself. Now, this isn't because they owe any loyalty to him, but simply because Dol Amroth has a line of royal blood and is really respectable amongst the Fiefdoms. So when we're talking about the Fiefdoms, we're talking about 7 or 8 different little areas that all work together under a common banner. Now, when we're talking about this army, we're going to go ahead and cover the strengths, the weaknesses, the tactics, and how to buy this army for a relatively cheap cost. This army is pretty rare, so a lot of people actually want to play it just simply to have something different on the field from everybody else. And I'll get into why it's rare a little bit later on. It's certainly not because it's bad. Now, as far as the strengths, one of the key people we have to mention is Prince Imrahil. This is the leader of the Dol Amroth faction, and he is amazing. We're talking about a solid D7 character with 3s all in the right places. And I'm talking about attacks, his wounds, everything. He has a very, very solid stat line. Also, he projects a 12-inch banner effect for all Dol Amroth troops. And even if it comes to it, he also has a 12-inch standpass and a great courage. And not only is he an amazing hero stat line and an also great leader, he can even be mounted and given a lance, which means he hits like a truck. We're talking about fight 6, strength 4, plus a lance equals a lot of dead bad guys. This guy is an all-around awesome hero, a tank, a brawler, and a utility hero all in one, and really stands out in this army. Next, we have Forlong the Fat and a lot of the other heroes of Fiefdoms. The Fiefdoms actually boast a lot of great heroes in general. Forlong the Fat is pretty much the Dwalin of men. He's probably the only man that actually has strength 5 within as its standard stat value. He also can be mounted, which means he also hits like a hammer as well. Angbor gives banner bonuses to his men, and we have also just pretty much relatively good heroes. I mean, the King of the Dead probably being the only one, as well as Duinherd, who doesn't really shine as brightly as the others, but still do their roles really well. The thing about their heroes is they tend to be pincushioned in sort of a niche after Imrahil. So Imrahil, while can do everything, the others really only do one thing very well, with Duinherd doing shooting really well, but not being so great of a leadership hero or a combat hero. The King of the Dead doesn't really do much of anything at all, except for being able to assassinate, assuming you get the opponent trapped well enough. And Forlong the Fat, while doing great as a combat hero, doesn't do too great as a leadership hero, and of course vice versa for Angbor the Fearless. Though, however, I'd still recommend taking them all. Now, another great thing about the Fiefdoms army is that they have the best shield wall in the game, or at least one of the best. You're talking about Knights of Dol Amroth in the front, supported by 2 pikemen, all fight 4, D6 up in the front, and bannered within 12 inches of Imrahil. This is an army that gets to roll an average of 4 dice if it hits from the front, all at fight 4. It's amazing. These guys really do well at holding their line. Probably the only shield wall that does better might be considered Isengard, but you'd have to almost consider that to be a factor. As far as a man army, though, or even any other type of phalanx, these guys pretty much do it best. So I'd highly recommend getting the Dol Amroth Knights and the Men-at-Arms as one of the core units in your army. Another advantage for the Dol Amroth is the fact that they have one of the best cavalry units in the game. Fully armored up Dol Amroth Knights are tough, defend 6 armored horses, and they hit really hard, all at fight 4. The best thing about them also is the fact that they have Imrahil. Whether he is on foot or mounted, he projects a 24-inch area that banners the knights. This is incredibly important because cavalry really need a banner in order to be super effective on their charges. They're not as good when they're losing fights. And this is also incredibly good for them because they have an area beyond anyone else's reach as far as bannering cavalry go. What this really long banner essentially means is that Imrahil can anchor a shield wall and still project his banner, which saves points and gives you a lot of tactical options. Another advantage of the Fiefdoms army is its versatile support troops. The Axemen of Losanak have an option to use spears or using piercing strike with two-handed weapons, which gives you a range of options. They can also form their own solid shield walls to protect your very static phalanxes. And not only that, but you have clansmen, which are very decent skirmishers, not to mention very popular because of the Scotsman look. You should take the clansmen in small loose groups to shore up the flanks, and always take Angbor since he banners them within 6 inches, and believe me, they need this. A lot of them like to go with two-handed strikes, so having that extra banner roll really helps. Also, Blackroot archers are really good nowadays since monsters are everywhere at these times, and every army should have a decent ranged unit in play. The fact that they get to re-roll failed to wound rolls against monsters allows them to offset their strength 2 bows. Just keep in mind, like the rest of this army, that they're not going to be versatile like the Rangers of Gondor, where they can't spear support, and they also don't really have as high a fight value or courage, meaning they're kind of slotted into a strictly archer role. So just be aware of that if you're switching from Gondor to this army. Also, they make an annoying backfield unit with good shoot value, and if you're going to have a hornblower, you might as well park it next to these guys since they're not really going to go anywhere. Don't worry about too much of the low courage because Imrahil will stand fast them pretty easily with his 12-inch bubble. Now, this is where I get into the major weaknesses of this army. The first major weakness, if you haven't noticed, is the super reliance on their heroes. This isn't like Gondor or any other army. The fact that these guys only get a lot of their best bonuses around their heroes and only become effective really around their heroes is really a downfall if your heroes start to go through a rough time. If your opponent manages to kill Imrahil and Angbor, then you're pretty much going to start going down. Remember, your heroes are tough, but they're not invincible, so you need to be aware of this fact. Another main problem with this army is it's really static. Those amazing pike phalanxes are not the most mobile since they have to stay in their tortoise formation to be effective. This essentially means that you are advancing forward and looking to grind it out. These guys are like Spartans of Lord of the Rings, and since they are so specifically formed and not the most mobile, they are liable to be exploited with flankers and fast-moving troops that get around your line. This is where, of course, you're going to want to use your Axemen and Clansmen in order to shore up your flanks, or the Dual Amroth Knights, of course. But just remember, if your phalanx falls apart, you're pretty much done for. Your Dual Amroth Knights are the infantry block of your race. You need to remember that everyone is fitted into a certain job, and once their job is gone, you're pretty much going to be screwed. Lastly, we're going to have to talk about the expense of this army. And I'm not talking about money, I'm talking about points. These troops are great, but they're very expensive for what is essentially 90% a D5 army. You can only have so many Swan Knights in fully kitted out units. And remember, even a fully kitted out Swan Knight is still a really high range of points. We're talking Sons of Errol and Rivendell Knights territory here, not Knights of Minas Tirith. So every model you lose is likely to hurt you quite a bit since you're going to be outnumbered more than most opponents who don't spam elites. Now, as far as the tactics of this army, due to the fact that most of the units are not very versatile, you're going to have to really play it in only really one of 2 ways. The first way is the Rankin flank, as we like to call it, which is essentially a large shield wall supported by Forlong and maybe even Imrahil, and having knights and other groups on the sides. This is pretty much the most common way it's played. You really want to go ahead and strike out the knights as soon as your shield walls have met in order to really grab up those things on the sides. A lot of times I will recommend having Imrahil on a horse with the knights and being able to call heroic fights that allow your knights to loop around into the back ranks where ringwraiths tend to be. Don't worry too much about your pike blocks. They're going to be just fine. A lot of them will do absolutely well. Just make sure to always keep them in ranks of 3 to make sure you get the maximum number of dice. Another thing you're going to want in the army is probably Duinhar and his Blackroot Vale archers. Now, the reason why is because the biggest weakness in your army, if you're going to play the shield wall formation, is monsters. One hurl from a monster will pretty much obliterate your entire shield wall. And remember, you're only D5 for most of your shield wall, which means a strength 3 hurl will absolutely devastate your army. You need to have your Blackroot Vale archers take them out, or if at very minimum, your Dual Amaroth Knights if you didn't decide to braid them. Make sure you do not go head to head with too many monsters. It will be an absolute nightmare. A second way this army is played is a mass cav charge. And this is not really the greatest tactic, but this is one of the few armies that you can actually do pretty well. Remember, Emer Hill gives that 12-inch banner bonus, and it works pretty solidly if you get the charge multiple times. Just remember that your heroic action still only affects 6 inches, so if you decide to spread them out too much, then some of your knights might suffer in the next priority roll. But, I mean, with a line of 12 knights, maybe supported by 12 Citadel Guard with spears behind them all mounted up, you'd actually do pretty well with this. Now, of course, we're talking about a Fiefdoms army only, but if you really want to just straight do Fiefdoms, then I'd recommend some Captains of Dual Amaroth mounted up and sprinkle in, Emer Hill and Forlong of the Fat on a horse, allowing you to do lots and lots of heroic fights that will allow you to jump around. Now, a last and final tactic of this army that we didn't really mention as much is really the Men of the Dead. They kind of seem forced in this army since they really only supported Aragorn during his time, but they are in the army, so of course we have to acknowledge them. It might seem very tempting at first to put them in the front of a phalanx and take advantage of their defense 8, which is very possible. And sure, we can recommend it, but ultimately, it doesn't work quite as well as we honestly want it to. These guys seem to do better just supporting themselves and kind of making their own shield walls. If you really want a solid shield wall, then Men of the Dead can make those ranks. You can make 2 ranks of Men of the Dead for about the same price that you would do 3 ranks otherwise. Just remember, you lose out on that banner bonus, and you also lose out on that extra attack. You're not going to do quite as well as you might think, but still, this is a strategy that is commonly used. Once again, just make sure you shore up your flanks as normal. But the ability to wound on courage also should be known as, it's not necessarily a benefit, just so much as different. A lot of armies out there have courage 2 and 3, of course. But of course, there are a lot of armies out there that have courage 5. You'll end up doing yourself a disservice if you start going up against those opponents. Now, in the next part of this video, I talk to you about how to buy this army for under $100. And now everyone knows that you can always go on eBay to find the best prices available. However, because of the fluctuating prices of eBay, we're really not going to talk about that here. Also, a lot of people know that other companies sell miniatures that look like these models for a lot cheaper than Games Workshop. Now, I won't go into too much detail with this, but if you're going to look at doing that, the best 2 to look for are Clansmen of Lamadon, whom look like pretty much Scotsmen, and the Axemen of Losanok, who pretty much look like medieval warriors. It wouldn't be too hard to find medieval chainmailed armored guys who are carrying around halberds. Now, as far as the rest of this army, you can pretty much look to GW for that pretty easily. However, just be aware it's still going to be extremely expensive if you look for it for all the other types of troops. The Men of the Dead are sold in plastic box kits, so they're pretty easy enough. The Knights of Dual Amaroth, though, however, are your real problem. If you buy the actual models, you're really going to get buried in the bank pretty quickly, and this is why no one plays the army as much. It's not because they're bad, they're actually a fantastic force, and they look amazing when painted. However, just understand that you're going to be spending a lot of money. Now, a lot of people have old Gondor models lying around, and I suspect that even new players can find them pretty easily. I'd highly recommend the Gondor warriors with sword and shield as your Knights of Dual Amaroth. Now, the Dual Amaroth mounted versions come in plastic kits, making them far easier to get. Still a rather expensive price, but due to the expensive point cost, it won't hurt you too bad, because the more of those you get, the smaller your army really needs to be. Now, the biggest problem you'll have is the men-at-arms. They are full pike-armed warriors, which means nothing else in Games Workshop will look quite like them. And what's worse, they're in blister packs. So ultimately, outside of GW is your only hope for these guys. Otherwise, you're really going to have to proxy or convert and make some models of your own. Now, as far as the Blackroot Vale archers, they're pretty much easy enough. The Rangers of Gondor pack is pretty much a pack that'll give you enough archer versions. Remember, you can't use the spear-armed ones. Well, I mean, you can, but just keep in mind that the Blackroot Vale archers can't get spears. The last problem you'll have is the fact that almost all of their heroes are out of production. So while it wouldn't be too hard to find some replacement suitable units, it is something that you should pretty much keep in mind that you can't buy them anymore. So that's pretty much it as far as what is available, what's not. It's going to be hard for me to really mass up a list for you, considering most of this army you're going to have to proxy in order to get really, really cheap. So as far as a list, just try your best to focus on the dual Amarok guys or what you can find. But I won't be making a list here in this video, given that I can't actually find enough proxies in GW's line to get this for under $100. Well, that's all for this video, guys. Let me know if you guys discover something that I didn't mention here. As always, please definitely give me suggestions in the comment section below. I know sometimes I tend to mispronounce things, and this army is definitely going to be one of those. I know that some of these are a bit more difficult to pronounce, so give me a hand in the comment section if you see it. Otherwise, let me know what you guys think. Do you want a Fiefdoms army? What do you think are the best parts of the Fiefdoms? And let me know in the comment section below, and then I'll see you next time.